It was 3:45 a.m. My patrol car hummed softly as the engine rumbled down the empty streets. The kind of night that makes you question whether you're the only person left in the world. There were no other cars, no movement, just the hum of the radio and the dark alleyways I passed. The night had been quiet, too quiet. Normally, a couple of drunks stumbling out of a bar, a small accident here and there, nothing major. But tonight? It felt like something was lurking just out of sight. Something waiting for me to notice. Then the call came in. Unit 7, we have a situation on 5th and Broadway. It's urgent. Code 3. The dispatcher's voice was frantic, higher pitched than usual, almost unrecognizable. I didn't think twice. I slammed the siren on and tore down the street, the only sound breaking the silence of the early morning. My lights reflected off the shop windows as I approached the intersection. The street was completely empty, no one in sight. I pulled over at the corner of the street, scanning the area. There was an old warehouse at the end of the block. Broken windows, peeling paint, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a crime scene documentary. The radio crackled again. Unit 7. We lost contact with Officer Daniels. He was sent to that location, and we haven't heard from him since. Daniels. I knew him. He was on the night shift, had worked this beat longer than I had. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I wasn't the type to be spooked easily, but there was something about the tension in the air, something that felt wrong even before I stepped out of the car. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, checked the safety, and began walking toward the building. The air was thick with a damp chill, cutting through my jacket like a blade. Each step I took toward that warehouse felt heavier, as if the ground itself was holding me back. The streetlights flickered above, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to follow my every move. I approached the rusted door of the warehouse, the silence around me pressing in. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under my boots. My flashlight beam swept over the door, and I noticed something strange. There was a smear of blood on the handle. It was faint, but unmistakable. My heart skipped a beat. Daniels? I called, my voice rough in the stillness. No answer. I pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges echoing through the building. The air inside smelled stale, like old leather and mildew. The flashlight illuminated rows of empty crates stacked high, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep within. My skin crawled. I moved forward, trying to steady my breath. The sound of my footsteps was deafening, breaking the silence in a way that felt unnatural. Every part of me screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. I had to find Daniels. He was out here alone, and if something had happened to him, well, I wasn't going to leave him behind. As I walked deeper into the warehouse, I heard it, soft at first, like a shuffle. Then, louder, a dragging noise. It wasn't just the creak of the building, this was a movement, a sound coming from somewhere ahead. My hand tightened around my flashlight. The light flickered. Daniels? I called again, louder this time, but my voice felt swallowed by the vast emptiness. I reached a hallway, dimly lit by a single hanging bulb at the far end. The drag-scraping sound was unmistakable now, closer. It was coming from the end of the hallway. I swallowed hard and stepped forward, my gun raised slightly, ready for whatever was about to emerge. I slowly inched down the hallway, my flashlight shaking in my grip, the beam cutting through the darkness. The dragging sound grew louder with each step, almost rhythmic, as if someone, or something, was purposefully drawing it out. It wasn't just a scraping sound anymore, it was something more deliberate. My instincts were screaming at me to turn around, but I couldn't. I had to know what happened to Daniels. I reached the end of the hallway, where the light barely reached. The room was nearly pitch black, except for the pale glow of the flashlight in my hand. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears, and I forced myself to take slow, shallow breaths. Then I saw it. A figure stood in the far corner of the room, obscured by the shadows. At first, I thought it was Daniel's, maybe he was unconscious or injured. But then I noticed something strange. The way he stood was wrong. Too still, too unnatural. Daniel's? I called out cautiously, my voice barely a whisper, but the figure didn't respond. It didn't even move. I took a step forward. My shoes squeaked on the concrete floor, and the sound seemed deafening in the silence. Suddenly, the figure shifted, jerkily, like a marionette with tangled strings. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure's head turned slowly toward me. There was something deeply wrong about the movement. It wasn't a natural turn, it was like it wasn't supposed to be moving at all. It was as if whatever was standing in front of me didn't belong in a human body. Then the figure stepped into the dim light. I recoiled, instinctively raising my flashlight higher. It wasn't Daniel's. It wasn't human. The thing that stood before me had a face, well, a twisted mockery of a face. Its skin was pale and stretched too tight across its skull. Dark, empty eyes bore into mine, and its mouth twisted into a grin that didn't fit its features, like it had been stitched together by some sick hand. It wasn't just its appearance that froze me, it was the aura around it. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier, and I could swear the walls were closing in on me. A primal fear, something deep and ancient, surged through my veins. It opened its mouth, but instead of words, a sound like nails on a chalkboard screeched from deep within its throat. I had to get out. I couldn't think. I turned to run, but the dragging noise, that sound I had heard before, was now right behind me. My legs moved before my brain could process what was happening. I bolted down the hallway, my boots pounding against the concrete, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The flashlight in my hand swung wildly, barely illuminating the path ahead. The dragging sound followed, closing in on me with every step, and I could hear something else now, footsteps. But they were different from mine. They were heavy, deliberate, like the weight of something far too large to be human. I glanced over my shoulder for just a split second. The thing, whatever it was, had started to move, dragging itself toward me. Its arms swung unnaturally, like it was still learning how to use them. Each jerk, each sharp movement, made my stomach twist. I didn't dare look back again. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the walls narrowing as if the building itself was trying to swallow me whole. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. There was no time for hesitation. No time to think. I reached the main door of the warehouse, the one I had come through, and shoved my shoulder into it. It didn't budge. The door was locked. I screamed in frustration, banging my fists against the steel. Panic surged through me like wildfire. Behind me, the dragging sound was louder now, so close it felt like the thing was breathing down my neck. I tried to yank at the door's handle, but it wouldn't move. I spun around, gun in hand, flashlight clutched tightly in my other hand. The hallway was empty. The thing was gone. For a second, I thought I might have hallucinated it. But my heart knew better. It was out there, somewhere in the dark, waiting. I turned back to the door, adrenaline pushing me to try again. But before I could even try to break the lock, a low, guttural voice whispered from behind me. "You're not going anywhere." I didn't need to turn around to know it was the thing, whatever it was, right behind me. It was so close, I could feel the cold from its presence, chilling the air around me. My fingers trembled as I raised my gun, my entire body screaming at me to flee. But then, in the split second before I pulled the trigger, something changed. The dragging sound stopped. Everything went silent. No footsteps. No breathing. Just the oppressive weight of the silence. And then I heard it. A faint laugh. It was chilling, as if it wasn't laughing at all but mocking the very concept of humor. It echoed down the hall, growing louder, more distorted. I was trapped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound I could have imagined. It was as if the world had just stopped. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and every breath I took felt like I was inhaling ice water. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat a loud reminder that I was running out of time. I backed up against the door, my gun still raised, fingers clutching it so tightly that they ached. My flashlight trembled in my other hand, casting wild, jittery shadows across the walls. Every corner seemed to be hiding something, something I couldn't see but knew was watching me. The laugh came again, even closer now, and I snapped my head around. The thing had moved without making a sound, a grotesque parody of human motion. Its face, God, its face, was twisted in that grin again, impossibly wide, as though it was stretching its mouth further than any human could. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't human. Whatever it wasn't even close. It stepped forward, dragging its left foot, scraping it across the floor. The sound reverberated through the empty warehouse, echoing like a warning. My hands were slick with sweat. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. The weight of the gun was too much, as though I was holding something that no longer belonged to me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, as the creature inched closer, its movements slow but certain. Its eyes locked on mine, unblinking, as if it was savoring my terror. It stopped just a few feet away from me. For a moment, I thought I could escape. Maybe if I ran, I could make it. But there was no way out. The air around me seemed to close in tighter, like the walls were folding in, pushing me toward the thing that stood in front of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I raised the gun and fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the silence. But when the smoke cleared, the creature didn't flinch. It didn't even react. The bullet had gone right through it, as if it wasn't there at all. "Missed," it whispered in that same distorted voice, the words like nails scraping against metal. I stared, wide-eyed, as the thing tilted its head, almost in amusement. It wasn't just messing with me. It knew it was untouchable. My mind raced for any way out, but it was hopeless. The thing started moving again, closer, the air growing colder as it approached. There was no escape. The walls were too close. The door, locked. And then it spoke again, its voice lower this time, like a growl. "It's too late for you." Before I could react, I felt something wet trickle down the back of my neck. My skin crawled. I tried to move, to run, but it was already too late. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the walls seemed to bend inwards, pushing me closer to the thing. My breath came out in visible puffs of fog, and the air felt thick, like I was breathing through a dense, suffocating curtain. The sound of my heartbeat was deafening, drowning out everything around me. The thing, it, moved closer, its eyes never leaving mine. I raised my gun again, but my hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep a grip on it. I tried to steady myself, but it was like the creature was feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every passing second. I could feel its presence, like it was inside my head, clawing at my thoughts. "You can't escape," it whispered, and the words slid into my mind, like ice running through my veins. "There's nowhere left for you to hide." I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't going to let it break me. I couldn't. I had a job to do, and I'd be damned if I was going to let this thing win. But the harder I tried to focus, the more the room seemed to spin. The shadows twisted, the light from my flashlight flickering wildly as though it were being swallowed by the darkness around me. Then, I felt it, a sudden, cold pressure against my chest, as if something invisible were pushing against me. I gasped, stumbling backward, but there was nowhere to go. The wall was right behind me. The creature's voice echoed in my mind again, but this time, it wasn't just a whisper. "You're already dead." The walls seemed to stretch out before me, impossibly far, as though the building itself was warping, changing, feeding into the nightmare. I glanced to my side and saw something that made my blood run cold. The very air around me seemed to shimmer, rippling like water disturbed by a stone. It was the hand, no, hands. They were translucent, ghostly, flickering in and out of existence. They were reaching for me, coming from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor, as if the entire building was alive, trying to drag me into its depths. I scrambled backwards, my gun slipping from my fingers, but they were too fast. I reached out in a futile attempt to stop them, but they closed around my arms, dragging me toward the darkness. The air thickened, and for a brief moment, I could see Daniel's, or what had been Daniel's, his face twisted in agony, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes hollow and lifeless. And then the thing appeared before me again. It wasn't just standing anymore. It was towering over me, its face now inches from mine. Its breath was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt, and it smelled of decay. It didn't speak. Instead, it simply reached out with its twisted hand, its fingers long and sharp. I closed my eyes, bracing for what I knew was coming. But it didn't happen. Instead, I felt my body being released, the invisible grip loosening. I stumbled backward, my knees hitting the cold concrete as I collapsed to the ground. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. But then, through the silence, a voice boomed from behind me. "Run." I didn't hesitate. As soon as the word run echoed through the warehouse, my legs propelled me forward, instinctively moving without thought. Every muscle screamed in protest, but there was no time to care. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The sound of dragging feet started up again, behind me, echoing through the cavernous space. The thing, whatever it was coming for me. I could feel its presence. I didn't need to see it to know it was right there, its dark aura pressing against my back like a cold, suffocating blanket. I hit the hallway at a dead sprint, the echo of my boots against the concrete bouncing off the walls, louder than ever. The flashlight in my hand flickered, and I slapped it hard, praying it would stay on. I couldn't think. I couldn't stop. I just had to get out. I was nearly to the main door when the lights overhead flickered out, plunging me into total darkness. My heart skipped a beat, and I stumbled, my foot catching on something unseen. I crashed to the floor, my knees scraping against the ground, and the flashlight went flying from my hand. The silence that followed was worse than the dragging footsteps. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, the kind of silence that tells you something is waiting. I scrambled to my feet, my pulse pounding in my ears, and groped the floor for the flashlight. My fingers brushed against cold metal, and I snatched it up, flicking the switch with trembling hands. The beam cut through the dark, but everything in front of me was wrong. The hallway stretched out impossibly long, farther than it had been before. The door I had just been heading toward seemed miles away. It was like the building itself had stretched and twisted, trapping me inside. I turned. The dragging sound was getting closer. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't fight it. My chest tightened with the realization. I had nowhere to go. But then I remembered the fire escape. A small exit I had seen when I first entered. I hadn't noticed it at the time, but now it felt like the only chance I had. I turned, my legs burning as I sprinted back down the hall, every instinct telling me to get to that door. The dragging sound followed. The thing wasn't far behind. I could feel its cold breath on my neck now. The terror that had gripped me before was a physical thing, clutching at my chest, squeezing tighter with each step I took. I reached the fire exit, yanked the door open with all the strength I had left, and burst out into the night air. The cool breeze hit my face like a slap, but it wasn't enough to shake the horror that clung to me. I stumbled into the alleyway, gasping for air, every part of my body screaming in pain. I turned and glanced back at the warehouse. The door had slammed shut behind me, but I could still hear it, the dragging sound. It was coming from inside the building. But the thing, it didn't follow. Not immediately. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. But I wasn't free. I ran. I ran. My legs felt like they were made of lead, each step heavier than the last, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I knew it was still out there, watching me. My mind screamed at me to go farther, to put as much distance between myself and that building as possible. The air outside was colder than I'd remembered, biting into my skin, but I barely felt it. My heart was still pounding in my chest, a constant drumbeat that refused to stop. I reached the end of the alley, my breath ragged and painful, and finally turned to look back, half expecting the thing to be right behind me. But there was nothing. Just the empty street. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the night sky. For a moment, I thought it was over. That maybe, just maybe, I had outrun it. But then, I heard something. A voice. Faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was calling my name. Officer Matthews. I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Daniel's. But it wasn't. His voice was distorted, deepened, like it had been twisted and warped by something unnatural. I spun around, my gun instinctively in my hand, but there was no one there. You can't run forever, the voice came again, this time from above me. I looked up, my eyes scanning the sky, the buildings, but there was nothing there. Just the dark expanse of the night above me, stretching on.